Welcome to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. It's a comedy-themed episode this time around. We've got a trio of players. I, Jason Compton, you will of course recognize as the abusive, domineering Mo Howard of this bunch. And we've also got sensitive ladies' man Larry Fine, or as we call him, Ben Collier. Ben, welcome to the program again.
Thank you for that introduction, Jason. I think that's entirely apt. Lovely.
And of course, we've also got the Shemp of the group. He's the fourth man, but a star in his own right, Nick Moffat.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm struggling to remember exactly how we got to this episode configuration. Ben, was this you recommending that we play Color of Magic? I think that was the genesis of it.
I haven't the faintest idea. Maybe I did. It came up. I was definitely very keen as soon as I saw Pratchett. I said, oh yeah, let's give that a go. But I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. I think it kind of, appeared out of the ether, a bit like one of the ideas Pratchett describes in his books, ideas that have found their time.
A spell that was buried in your brain for decades, and one day it had to come out.
Well, just kind of existing out there in the eighth sphere, and kind of making its way slowly inward, and now it's manifested as something that we're all doing. What about this appetizer, this entree? Where did this come from?
Yes, the appetizer I definitely take credit from. That is one of my guilty or not so guilty pleasures. I wear it and own it openly. So yes, we've got two games for you this time around. Mystery Science Theater 3000 presents Detective, a pastiche and sort of fanfic game from 1995, as well as 1986's The Color of Magic, created by Level 4. That will be our main course. So now it's on to our appetizer game from 1995, MST3K Detective. All right, Mystery Science Theater 3000 Detective. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the game came to be, but then I do, of course, want to poll everybody about just what their connection to MST3K is or is not. This game was submitted to the very first interactive fiction contest from 1995. And this was from the early days when, it's a bit like saying if you're going to evaluate, a book manuscript or a screenplay based on whether it's spiral bound or put in a 3-ring binder. Back then, they had different divisions for TADS, which was kind of the dominant parser-based development system at the time, and the up-and-coming Inform, which was gaining steam, not least of which because it could output to the Z-Machine format that Infocom created and made famous. This was an Inform creation, I should say, by CE Forman. It rated 4th out of 6 entries in the contest, and notably, when Activision put out the Infocom masterpieces not long after, they went out and actually got permission from the creators of the top 3 games to in both divisions to put on the CD-ROM, which was an amazing thing for those of us who were immersed in the community at the time. Now, whether they made the cutoff at 3 because, that sounds like a nice thing, you put the top 3 in there, or because number 4 was this, sticky fanfic, unlicensed adaptation of a television show, Mystery Science Theater 3000. I'm going to start with you, Ben, simply because you are the furthest from their point of origin here in Minnesota, the upper Midwest of the United States. Did you or do you have any connection to Mystery Science Theater beyond this game?
This was completely mad.
Oh, fantastic.
I had no idea what was going on here. I have no idea. I have no idea what Mystery Science Theater 3000 was. It all seemed very, very strange. None whatsoever. No connection. Completely perplexed. No cultural connection to this whatsoever. I suppose I have now. I might as well say this right now. A very strange one for us because it's a 1995 Inform game, which is an adaptation of a 1980 or something game.
It's a little later than that because it was AGT.
Yeah, and I can even tell from the area codes, the fact that it was a BBS with a 510 area code,
right?
That dates it because in the 80s, that part of California was still 415.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
So Detective itself, the original Detective, what does it say here? 93.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Okay. All right, so that's quite interesting.
So it's post-commercial period in the U.S., but still 30 years old. So
yeah, absolutely. So interesting. All right, so my question then is really, what's the cutoff period for a retro adventure? I think the cutoff period is something like 1994.
Oh, sure.
And
Well, this averages out to 94. How's that?
It does. There you go.
It does, and it's interesting because this is in the kind of demilitarized zone between retro and modern IF, I would say.
Not yet vintage.
And even more specifically,
Yeah.
I would actually make a case for the first competition being the pivot point. And I say that because, and we talk about this a little bit when we have Andrew Plotkin on the program, his game that won the Informed division, A Change in the Weather, it kind of in many ways is the pivot point between this is what we used to do and this is what we're going to do now. So Detective being a silly, frivolous, jokey release, literally, in the same event that a Change in the Weather and the now Andrew Plotkin is the dominant tastemaker of interactive fiction, for the next several years to come. We can argue about whether Emily Short has supplanted him, but for several years, he was clearly the tastemaker. Yeah. So I think to answer your question seriously, Ben, I will go out and say that anything after the first competition, maybe you say like, well, it's got retro stylings or whatever, but I'll say up until that line, I have no qualms about including something.
It's a fair analysis.
So I think this is interesting. I think it's really interesting, and for sure we're allowed to break the rules. I mean, what are they for? Yeah. I think this is fascinating because it's on the cusp. So interesting. And I'm sorry, I've taken the question about cultural connections to Mystery Science, whatever it is, 3000.
So short answer, no. Nick,
yes.
What was your connection to Mystery Science Theater, if any?
This is great, right? Because here I am in London, often completely baffled by a lot of the British childhood references. Not all, but a lot of them that come up between Ben and Dave. And this is something that is very tied to my adolescence because Mystery Science Theater 3000 showed up. I grew up in Seattle. And so this came up in an era when the United States had a class division in television. I would classify it as a 3-tier class system. So your lowest class is your broadcast television. That's the stuff where you buy a set, you take it home. In the US, there are no license fees or anything. You turn it on, you pick up radio waves out of the air, and you watch whatever's on, right? That's sort of the lowest class.
Okay.
And then you could pay a monthly subscription fee to have far more channels delivered to you over coaxial cable. Mm-hmm. And then you could upgrade that subscription for more channels. And the regions that often determined what channels were in the basic package. We'd call it basic cable, or what you'd have to pay for. So very often, you would always have to pay a fee specifically for, let's say, Disney or HBO or Cinemax, any of those pay services. But it was always kind of region-based, whether or not some of the other channels, especially some of the up-and-coming ones, would be paid or basic cable. I can't remember what we had at home. We bounced between basic and just normal broadcast back and forth for years as we decided it was worth it or not.
Yeah.
And I never had the Comedy, was it Comedy Central, Comedy Network, Cartoon Network?
Yes, this is the whole thing where there was initially Ha and the Comedy Channel.
That's right.
And Mystery Science Theater started on the Comedy Channel. Those two merged to become Comedy Central, which is now the brand that survived. And it ran on that for several years after that, yes.
So there we go. Now, this will come up, but the reason why I count this as formative, even though I didn't have access to it via our cable, was that at the Mystery Science Theater 3000 sort of had a punk aesthetic to it. It was a very sort of homebrew look to the show in some ways. And at the end, they had a little encouragement that would say, keep copying those tapes.
Circulating the tapes, yes.
Keep circulating the tapes. And that was because they knew they had a cult following. Because, they were in the style of a sort of people who followed cult cinema. And so they knew they had a cult following. They knew people were recording the show from their expensive cable service and giving it to friends. And I was one of those friends who would receive tapes from someone and watch it at home on my VHS player.
Right. So, my eyebrows went up when you were talking about the 3-tiered system because, yes, although Mystery Science Theater 3000 was on basic cable, which you'd sort of planted at the second tier, it was clearly the lowest tier of television as it was shot on video for about $25 per episode, which was part of the appeal of it. It's a man in a jumpsuit. He's got a couple of robots with him that are cobbled together out of household parts. He's being tormented by a couple of guys in a cheaply constructed set that make them watch bad movies, or in our case, play a bad text adventure, which is where the detective in MST3K Detective comes from. We were talking about the origins of it. That was written by a young man named Matt Barringer in 1993. At that point, you've got nascent internet distribution. You've got cheaper long distance calling. People can call around BBSs, and it got some distribution. It got written up, I believe, in Spag, which was kind of the big IF text newsletter at the time. And the suggestion was made, this is such a bad game. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody missed it misted it. Misting being the act of sitting down and riffing on this work of art. For a little bit of background, I first saw Mystery Science Theater out 91, I want to say, second or third season. Actually, it was Side Hackers. I remember the episode and turning it on and just, I caught it midway through and my mind is being blown as I'm watching this movie get, picked apart with these little riffs. I had previously seen there was a series, I think from the 80s called Mad Movies in the US where people would kind of overdub short films or film segments. And of course, if you're a Woody Allen fan, What's Up Tiger Lily does something similar. They're overdubbing an entire new plot track over it. But the idea of we're going to take this thing that maybe on its own isn't the best or maybe would be incomprehensible, and instead we're going to insert our jokes, our gags, our new storyline on it. So that
so Jason, is this? I'm just trying to get for those of us who are from a kind of European persuasion. Is this kind of level of stuff? Was this at the kind of the only cultural reference I've got here is Wayne's World? Was this at the Wayne's World level of kind of production value?
So what Wayne's World is trying to send up? Yeah. So yes. Wayne's World claims to be public access television, which we do not want to make this the U.S. broadcast history podcast. That would be a different genre. But I guess I would say that yes, that Saturday Night Live's interpretation of what a public access budget would be is quite similar. So close, does that mean, Ben, that you have not been motivated to go out and check out one of the 250 or so episodes that they've done?
I haven't. Okay. No, I haven't. It might be interesting to our American viewers that in the viewers.
Here we go.
I always say it, don't
That's
I?
Fine.
Fine. Listeners, viewers, don't mind. They might find it interesting. In the United Kingdom, we didn't ever have cable. There were some attempts.
Yeah, B-Sky B and stuff like that, right?
But we went straight from having 4 channels to having satellite on satellite television with Sky, Rupert Murdoch. So the idea of cable television to a lot of UK people certainly would be quite unusual. Yeah, there were some attempts at cable, but they were typically kind of local attempts, kind of in one town or one tiny region, and the cabling got reused for broadband later on. So anyway, yes, no, I didn't look up Mystery Science Theater 3000. In all honesty, I have this at the back of my brain. I think I may have seen a clip of it for all of 10 seconds once. No, it was interesting. It was well, we'll get into the adventure in a minute, but it was interesting. The whole experience was interesting, disorientating, and it opened my mind. There we are.
Nick, what were you going to say something?
Well, I was actually going to take us a little bit into the broadcast history because this also comes from a tradition of late night creature features, which was another U.S. tradition. When almost no one was watching, they would often give space on some local channels to someone who would play an old monster movie from the 50s or 60s, and then at the commercial breaks at station ID times come in and give a little bit of background on, Toho Studios or whoever made the film. So there was already sort of this tradition in the US of if you tuned in late at night, you could watch some old, possibly terrible films and maybe get a little commentary as well. This was just a much more sort of Statler and Waldorf heckling the film format of that in some ways.
Yeah. Interesting. So you guys got creature features, and we got teletext set to music and Open University recordings.
There you go. Yeah, pretty much.
There we are.
All right. So this game creates the conceit, I guess, that the Mystery Science Theater crew is being forced to play a text adventure for a change. I'm going to throw this out there, and Nick can sound off. It'll mean nothing to you, Ben. It was honestly a little provocative that author CE Forman chose Mike, who was the recently inserted host at the time, rather than Joel, who was the co-creator and more traditional host of the show.
It was controversial.
It was a little bit, yeah. That's one of your early internet arguments. There is the Mike versus Joel wars. But Mike and his 2 robot pals, Crow and Tom, are put in this parser-based world. So as you play the game, you're getting commentary from Mike, Tom, Crow, sometimes even from the Mads, the mad scientists. The game starts with a sequence that tries to recreate the door sequence, which again was something that was made for $4 in an afternoon with pieces laying around the studio. But Ben, none of this really landed for you. You really didn't know why these things were coming in all caps.
No. I when you start the game, you've got the opportunity to there are some notes. So it gives you it says press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. And if you do that, there's enough preamble and there's enough scene setting to understand what on earth's going on, because obviously I'm not completely unfamiliar with this format of people talking over the top of other things. So it gave. I was pretty quickly able to grok what was going on with this. But yeah, again, just very odd in as much as you're trying to understand the context that these people are talking in, or robots or whatever they were, at the same time as you're trying to understand Detective, which is a marvelous game.
Do not try to understand Detective.
Well, it's interesting. I'd love to know what. I suppose we can find out what Detective was written in.
So I guess we've spent a lot of time pulling apart how this game came to be. Like I said, it was written in Inform. It's a Z5 game, so you can play it in virtually anything that has an Infocom interpreter. It's resource light in that way. Oddly, there have been several reformats of it since the initial competition version. Author CE Forman did a cleaned up version that had some additional preamble, also has an interview with Matt Barringer, kind of catching up with him, and Matt's being a very good sport about this. There was some concern at the time that this was kind of mean and, picking on this guy, but he understood that he had written a poor game, and he was not, he had other things in his life, and he was not too personally crushed by it. I happened to play, I played both the Silver Screen, and then there was a new remix by Stuart Moore in 2000, which I had forgotten existed, in which he adds some additional gags. I think I mentioned being a verbose guy on the podcast. One of the first things I like to do is verbose, and there's a note from Dr. Forrester, which I believe is new to this particular remix of it, that you can't use any of the brief or super brief or verbose commands because he wants you to suffer through every moment of it. That was a little bit. How did you two play it?
I played it on Gargoyle, which is a pretty common cross-platform, but really nice on Unix graphical version. So I usually play Frotz, but this time it was Gargoyle. So I remembered that I had nice fonts and colors set up, so I've gone back to that.
Well, I did a quick and dirty Frotz, to be honest with you. I was, brew install Frotz, and then we were... Interestingly, and we'll come on to this in a bit, I feel a little bit like whoever did create the Z Machine version of this probably had to torture this thing into doing what it does. It's been a while since I've written any Inform, but can't remember how easy it is to force it to do all sorts of strange behaviors. We'll get onto the behaviors in a minute.
Yeah, and there is code archaeology you can do because he did release the source code. I believe it's for Inform 5, so not all of it would be relevant today, but you can see. Yeah, Detective was written in Adventure Game Toolkit, AGT, which came out in the late 80s. I think, for lack of a better term, it kind of bridges the worlds between, say, the Quill and maybe Dad, and then before you get to Tads and where you'll see a lot of games from that kind of, for lack of a better term, awkward late 80s and early 90s period where people were like, we know we want to make these games, and it is easier to do it this way, but it's not quite as powerful. So you do see some iffy games. Well, you see iffy games on all platforms, but I cannot remember playing a really great AGT game, but maybe I have just not spent enough time with it. So yes, Detective, you are the detective. You are taking on the murder. The murder occurred yesterday, which all the typos have been left in and lovingly riffed on. And there's a gun. There's navigation that doesn't work, and the game calls it out when it says that there's a dead end to the east. You try to go east, says you can't go that way. And then Mike jumps in. Then why'd you bother telling us that we could go east? You kind of trundle your way through. There's not much challenge to it. You're kind of told the best way to play the game is to make sure you look at every room twice, because he didn't want to do a wall of text with all of the possible riffs. Broadly speaking, did we deliver on the premise? Is this funny, if not fun, to play?
I think it's funny. I think it did a good job of hitting the point. And one of the experiences of MST3K is when some aspect of production shows through, and they're like, boom mic in the shot, and they make a joke about it, that kind of thing. And I think that sort of joke really landed here, where it's very structural, or poor script writing, where they're or direction or editing, where they're just complaining like the whole point of editing is to actually cut from one thing to another. Why are you giving us all this shoe leather? And that was sort of another running gag that kept going through, is all the hallways.
I thought it was mean. I thought it was punching down. I felt really sorry for Matt Barringer, who had written this when he was all of 12 years old,
thereabouts.
Yeah, it's a nasty thing to do. I mean, by the time this was made, he was 14. Famous for writing a bad text adventure. I mean, a lot of us, I'm sure my first attempt at a text adventure was a great deal worse than Detective. In fact, I know it was a great deal worse than Detective. So I feel very sorry for Matt Barringer. And Matt, if you're listening to this, I strongly doubt you are, but I feel very sorry for you. I don't know what these people have done to you. It was very well observed. There was a point at which I was playing it, and I got to a certain point, and I thought, oh my God, I'm completely lost. And at that very moment that I said, I'm completely lost, the characters of the Mystery Science Theatre robots said, I'm feeling lost, which is great. And I was like, oh, thank God they're feeling lost too. I'm certainly feeling lost. I think it was somewhere between the something and the video shop or something. And so that was clever. It was very, very cleverly observed. They really understood what it was doing to the player. And they even, in places, they help you to actually navigate so that you can get through it more quickly, which quite frankly was a mercy. Sorry, Matt.
Now who's being mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, sure. He was 12 years old. He was writing game. He even says in one of the documents in the end, I think, that it was with the help of other people on that BBS in Pleasanton or wherever it was that he lived at the time. And so, this is a game that he shared with his friends. They were supportive. He got what he wanted out of it from his local community. I think the real cruelty probably came when it was covered in spag and kind of lambasted there. Because that was actually where the idea of this came up from, was the conversations around that. Right.
It was reviewed with some level of earnestness, but you could argue whether it was necessary to do so. Although, again, I'll say that those were dark days in the text adventure field. So maybe you were just grasping for what you could get. Personally, Ben, looking backwards, I mean, Matt Barringer was internet famous almost before that was even possible.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit like the sort of Star Wars boy and all that sort of stuff, isn't it? Yeah, same sort of thing. Well, no, it's interesting. You look at Detective, you look at the original Detective, right? And someone says, famous for being bad, but actually not that awful. And the person says, I liked it. He said it was the sheer energy and gung-ho nature of it, which I agree. Someone else says that Matt didn't really mind, which is fair enough. And then you've got Baff's Guide and Spag, and they can get lost. So, yeah.
These being reviews on IFDB, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the IFDB reviews. Yeah, you are sort of ushered through it, aren't you? You're ushered through the game. That's probably the best way of putting it. I mean, if you don't die by walking into a room, you're ushered through the game.
Well, and if you do die, fortunately, because this is a Z5 game, you do actually have undo, which I don't think you would have had in the original AGT.
No, I don't think so.
No. Almost certainly not. That was another mercy, because it seems fine up until about halfway through. And then you get to, what would you call it? The mansion with the murderer in? Is that what it is? I suppose it is. And you get there, and all of a sudden it goes from this game that's kind of whisking you through, almost like, have you ever been on one of those kind of, if you go to the swimming pool where they've got the wave machine, they also have the rapids, and you go in and they've got the water going in one direction, and you go in there and you sort of, the water drags you through. I hope that's a reference that lands with people all over the world. And that's what it felt like. So the first half felt like you're being pulled through the rapids. And then you come out of the other end, and all of a sudden they've turned the wave machine on and you're being smacked in the face. So it gets to the murderer's mansion, and then all of a sudden it's very difficult. Or at least you're sort of, you take a wrong turn and it's insta-death.
Yeah. I mean, insta-death is definitely one of the aspects of this game, for sure. And again, you have undo, so it's not as bad as it would have been originally. But and sometimes when you die, they'll comment on how ridiculous that was too.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the thing that really the one bit that made me actually sympathise with the people who lampooned this was where you shoot the fellow and he vanishes in a cloud of green smoke.
Yeah,
which I thought was fantastic. I don't know what he was aiming for there, but yeah, and then it doesn't sort of register that he's done it anyway, so he's still there even though he's vanished in a cloud of green smoke.
And it has nothing to do with the murder, as near as I can tell, because you still have to get to the actual case and have the police come in and
I was starting to think it was kind of going in a sort of like V. Do you remember that V with the
snake
with the
snake
reptiles
aliens,
or something? And the guy, I was thinking, oh right, this is going to take a strange turn. It's going to turn out that they're like. Or what's the one where he puts on the dark glasses?
They
and
live.
Suddenly you can see them. They live. Yeah, like They Live or something, right? I thought it was going to go in that direction with like you shoot them and actually they evaporate in green smoke.
Yeah, John Carpenter Presents Detective would be a different game.
It'd be a very different game.
Yeah. But no, it literally had nothing to do with anything. It's brilliant.
All right. Well,
why not?
I have revealed something about my sense of humor, I guess, by putting this one on the docket. This was a game that, when it came out, I'm like, this is fantastic. I really enjoyed this. And honestly, it came out at a time where, at that point, 1995, I think I was aware on some level that fanfic existed. I'd had, little, exposure to it. But I think the idea that kind of anything could be riffed on, could be, made pastiche, could be, fanfic, and, seeing like this, this television property inserted into the game and which, frankly, a lot of the past 30 years of internet culture has been this remix and fanficking. So I enjoyed it. It's been some years since I played it, so I was honestly bracing myself a little bit. I'm like, am I not going to be entertained by this? But I was entertained, plenty good. I thank you both for coming with me on this journey into the mind of Matt Barringer. And for our main course, we have The Color of Magic, based on the novel by Terry Pratchett. This was created by Level 4. That's our friend Fergus McNeil of Board of the Rings fame. It was published by Piranha. It was then published by Alternative. It was copyright to Macmillan. I believe that's the initial copyright holder of the novel. This game was published for the Spectrum, the C64, and the Amstrad CPC. It was only, so far as I can tell, released on tape as a chopped up 4-part game, of which I'm going to have more to say shortly. The game of the book of the game. This was definitely a thing in the 80s, probably the single most famous being Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is name-checked in this game in one of the Easter eggs. But before we go any further, Ben, you were the one, we're pretty sure, who put this game forward. What was your connection to it before we put it on the schedule?
Well, I don't know. Well, first off, I can't remember recommending this. I don't know how it happened. However, everyone loves a bit of Pratchett, especially if you're English. Especially if you're English of a certain vintage. Who wouldn't want to play The Colour of Magic? I remember seeing it on sale in W.H. Smith's back in probably, I guess, maybe 1989, when it was all taking off and it was all becoming quite popular. Everyone loves Terry Pratchett, and who wouldn't want to play a game based on his first book, The Colour of Magic? So, strong connection to it, and I would leap into playing this.
And Nick?
Well, I'm sorry that our listeners are not viewers, as Ben keeps calling them, where you would see that I have shown up today dressed as Two-Flower.
It looks marvelous.
I have got my loudest Aloha shirt on. I am wearing my glasses, so I have my 4 eyes. And behind me, I have an old Fortnum & Mason hamper propped open to stand in as the luggage. So I'm fully throwing myself in here. I had not played this before.
Ooh, I didn't understand. No. I just thought you were trying to sort of flex on us with the Fortnum & Mason.
Visual gags. Didn't quite land. That's okay. Diagramming. It always works.
It's a hamper. It's a hamper.
I know. It's the closest I've got. I don't have a chest with 1,000 feet. I'm very sorry. But anyway, yes. So I, of course,
you look spectacular. By the way.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. I'm, again, grew up in America. However, child of librarians, and someone had told me, if you love Douglas Adams, you'll love Pratchett. The library had, I think, the first 8 books. I can't remember how many it was, but they ended with Mort, I think. And so I read the first set, kind of inhaled them of a summer weekend afternoon or something, not even checking them out, just reading them there in the library. Loved it, absorbed it, and only later started to find out some of the backstory of the books and how they were themselves lampooning very specific things that I had not encountered yet. But I have a question about this game before we begin, which is, it's the first book, but my hazy 30-year-old memory is that because it's a 4-parter, the first part reminded me of the first book. I thought a lot of this game was from the second book. Am I wrong?
Ooh, now that's interesting. So a bit of setup here. Okay. We've got a few text adventures on the way that are based on books. And I love this because it gives me an ability to either go back and reread something I've read before, or read a book that I've never read before. And there will be more, gentle listener. There will be more to this. There's going to be lots of this sort of thing going on. It's going to be quite exciting. This one, a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I thought, oh right, oh gosh, yes, Colour of Magic. I'm trying it. I need to do the book. Picked up the book, started reading it, got about halfway through, but it was the second time I'd read it, and I only remember this being the whole Fire of Ankh-Morpork type of thing, and I don't remember the later parts. So I was working on the assumption that I had read this halfway through on a previous occasion. I've read loads of the other books all the way through. I think my first one was Mort, and then I also read the Assassin books, all those ones that were pyramids. So I read all those the first way, but I don't think I ever read. But my assumption was, having played this game, that I must not have read it all the way through because there's all this other stuff going on. The book does sort of it teases all of the bits at the end of this. I don't know the answer.
My memory is that the first book is, as you say, entirely focused in Ankh-Morpork. It is about the Great Fire, and it is about the effects that Two Flowers' arrival has on the city.
Yeah,
and that's its stage, that's its setting, and that's the story it tells. And that them going further afield out into the disc is the next 2, maybe 3, because Rincewind is in the first 5 books or something. And then he disappears and comes back once or twice, and then the rest is other stories, as you say. But I think I'm pretty confident that the ending of this is the ending of the second book, possibly second or third.
And we would both be wrong.
We could be both wrong.
We are wrong.
Oh wow!
Because looking at Wikipedia.
Oh right.
They visit Wormberg, an upside down mountain, and then they're taken to the edge of the Discword.
Okay. Good to know.
I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
It's interesting because the Ankh-Morpork part of it is fairly contained in the story as I remember it, and it ends with a pun that I felt put a bow on the whole thing, which didn't appear in the game that I remember.
Same, and I know the one you're talking about, and I for whatever reason I had the same memory.
Yeah.
So there must be something about this book that means that no one remembers the second
Feels like
half.
a two-parter. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because we do get the pun of the in-sewer ants.
Yeah, in sewer ants.
But we don't get the reverberations of small small people's actions or whatever it is that becomes the problem of Ankh-Morpork and Two Flowers largesse.
And I have been silent in this discussion because I am to Discworld as Ben is to Mystery Science Theater, although I'll a little bit differently. So I've been aware of these books forever. They've been recommended to me any number of times, and I've gotten as far, I believe, as putting Color of Magic in my luggage to take on a trip to read on a plane or during downtime, and it's just never happened. And it's not because I don't want to. I think the pressure now is just, what would be wrong with me if I don't love these books as much as I should after being told for 30 years that I'll love them. And specifically for this, honestly, I suspected that maybe Ben wouldn't know a lot about Mystery Science Theater, so it would be interesting to see if I didn't know about the game coming in. I've been a little busy lately, and I just wanted to see, what does it mean to take a game like this on without having read the source material. So I did go into it knowing a lot of tropes, and bits and gags, because as some of the reviews of a novel initially coming out, it's one of those novels that people like to quote and tell you about. So, I know stuff and things about the world. I did not know going in that you would not be able to go north, east, south, and west.
No.
Instead, they have honored the premise of the Discworld, which is itself a send-up of things like Larry Niven's Ringworld, by saying that the directions are hubward, rimward, turnwise, and widdershins. And all of your directions have to be given in that way. Ooh, there was a point where you go look at what's about to be a maze, and I'm like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can make my brain work along these lines. No. Fortunately, it's not a game so much about navigation as it is about waiting. But we'll talk about that.
It is, absolutely, 100%.
If you like waiting, and if you like bailing occasionally, just to mix it up, you can bail instead of just waiting. You're going to love this game.
Let me give it a little more speeds and feeds info, and then we can talk about actual gameplay. Credited, in addition to Fergus McNeil, to Colin Bucket and Judith Child, the 3 8-bit platforms as mentioned. I didn't realize until I was putting together the notes for the episode that there have been in-form remakes, including a rare use of the Z6 format with graphics. Ooh. The game does have graphics. I felt that the use of graphics tailed off, like a lot of games that we discussed that are British tape load games. Not every area has an image. I definitely recall seeing more and more useful, meaningful ones in part 1 than in the other parts 2, 3, 4.
What did you play it on? Jason?
Well, I started out playing on the Commodore 64 version, and then I got to the end of part 1.
Yes,
now,
same.
at the end of part 1... you're told, at the end of each part, you're told you have to save your progress and it's going to be loaded in by the next part. Now, some games, like Board of the Rings, the world kind of resets when you go from part to part. This one is reading data out of your saved game to bring into parts 2, 3, and 4. And so after getting my way through part 1, when I was then prompted to save the game, I went ahead and attached a disk image to my Vice emulator, told it to save the game, and the game crashed. So then after that, I played the Spectrum versions 2, 3, and 4 off the Internet Archive because then they would just work.
Yeah, gotcha.
I assume that really worked out there in the world. I don't think this is a case like Sherlock where the game just wasn't playable on the C64. I feel like we would have heard about that, but I just didn't have it in me to go back and play it again. The other thing about that Spectrum version had that the 64, and I think Amstrad didn't, was the Spectrum version had a custom character set, and 64, and I think Spectrum are using system defaults, which makes no sense.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about this. So it's a Quill game, and it's Delta Force, so it's the Scottish lot. Yeah. What normally, if you've got something on the CPC, it's normally a bit better graphics wise than the Spectrum. Often you'd get Spectrum ports, and it would just look like the Spectrum version, minus the color clash, but in this instance, the ZX Spectrum version looks a hell of a lot better than the CPC one. Started out on the CPC, because it was my old platform back in the day, and having spotted the difference, I ended up playing the ZX Spectrum version, because the colours are punchier, so the colours, the game suits the palette that was available on the Spectrum, and I'm going to assume, and you can cut me down if you like, that the Quill allowed, or in whatever way, we were able to do custom fonts on the ZX Spectrum. I'm assuming because the system font was held in RAM, or it was loaded into RAM, or something was possible on that, because all it's got on the CPC is the system font, and it looks ghastly. It looks really horrible, and the colours are all drab, and it's miserable. But on the ZX Spectrum, it looks fabulous. With the custom font and the punchy graphics. Yeah, I loved it. So I loved how it looked on the Spectrum.
Yeah, I will say that on the Commodore 64, it is incredibly common to do character set remapping. They just didn't, for whatever reason. I mean, we've mentioned in previous episodes of this show the games like Below the Root, which were largely done with character set remapping to create block elements to construct entire scenes from. So it's not an unheard of technique on the C64. It just, I don't know if it was a limitation of the Quill on that platform or whatever, or if they just decided not to do it.
I do wonder if it's the Quill. It's that for whatever reason the Quill had been optimized for the Spectrum.
Possible.
Don't know.
What did you play on, Nick?
So I did the same thing you did. It's kind of funny that we all ended up on the Spectrum in the end, because I did exactly the same thing you did. Instead of crashing, for me, what it did was it just restarted part 1, and nothing I could do trying to tell it. There was no opportunity for me to start number 2 and say, load this save game. I fiddled around as much as possible and said, right, that's fine. I haven't got time for this. And I moved to the Spectrum. So regarding the graphics, the one thing the Commodore 64 did, I think the Commodore 64 graphics were nice. Obviously, the Commodore 64 has a much stranger palette than even the CPC in some ways. And yet, I have to agree. I did like the sort of block poster print style that the Spectrum version had. The one thing I was intrigued by was that the Commodore 64, all of those graphics were framed, the sort of outline of the graphics, instead of just being a picture frame of squares or lines or whatever. It actually was Mort himself and his scythe to either side of the graphics. And I was expecting that to do something, right, when in the scenes where he shows up. And yet the scenes where he shows up, there are no graphics. So it was kind of...
Yeah, it was just flavor.
Yeah.
There's a really extensive article out there from Jimmy Marr. We'll link to that in the show notes. Talks about the level of collaboration, because I have to say one of the things that struck me about this game was I was like, ooh, this seems pretty well written. Not having the book in front of me, I can't tell how much of that is just from because we lifted passages or adapted them straight from the novel. Maybe you guys can help me out from that.
Speak to that.
but talks about Fergus McNeil being able to make the deal. And again, Color of Magic was not a terribly big deal upon its initial release, so seems like it probably wasn't too tricky. McNeil was able to make the deal and created his Color of Magic text adventure in short order with some direct input from Pratchett himself. The end result, which was released in late 1986 in Britain and Europe only, is an abbreviated version of the novel, walking through its plot scene by scene. McNeil speaks of his communications with Pratchett fondly, going so far as to call him a big inspiration for me, whilst being allowed to make the game at all a huge privilege. Yet Pratchett was enough of a gamer himself to recognize how underwhelming the final project really was.
Oh no.
In his view, it cheapened the Discworld brand, of which he was always keenly protective. He would refer to the interactive Color of Magic only as a, quote, bad experience in later years. So, you guys having looked at the book with some amount of recency, how much of this is Ferguson and his team's writing style was elevated a little bit by the source material, and how much was just he's just adapting passages from the novel?
Let me put it this way. The whole thing is passages from the novel strung together.
It's a rail shooter with Pratchett's text, basically.
Yeah. And I think the reason that we basically earlier spoke about weight. I think realistically this is someone has gone, right, which are the bits I need? And they've gone through and they've lifted them all. There are a few little bits that are, that are the kind of funny. There is some interactivity in this, but the interactivity is really lacking. And it's because the people who made it have gone, right, we need to bake in Pratchett and we need to get the player through this story in 4 parts. And then and we will get the important bits in. And there are a lot of drawbacks to that. I'll go into some later. Nick, you're nodding away.
Yeah, I am. And I have to say, one thing I think that would have upset Pratchett in particular is the fact that some of those passages are not even completely carefully transcribed. There are typos in this game.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure must have, got Pratchett's back up a little bit. But yes, this is very clearly a subset of, now we all agree, the first book, for sure.
Yes.
Certain elements removed from it. There's a thread that doesn't pay off in this book, which may be why I'm thinking of future books as well. And that doesn't even get mentioned. We've already mentioned, I think I only caught one of a series of puns that went on in the Ankh-Morpork section, where in particular characters would take terms that make sense in our world, in our reality, things like insurance, and come up with a sort of long-winded, a Shaggy Dog story, dad joke sort of situation where ants in a sewer and, pouring oil and all this other stuff becomes the phrase in sewer, ants, and that's insurance, etc. But otherwise, yeah, this is I'll say it again. This is a rails shooter for Pratchett's text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The really sad part is that a lot of the jokes that make much more sense in the context of the book, because you can't just transcribe the entire book and drop it into the text adventure, there are very funny parts which land far better in the book because you've read the whole thing. What they've done in this game is they've dropped in, they'll drop in the line of text, the line of dialogue, but it won't have been fully set up correctly. So the one I'm thinking of in particular, so there's a portion where Two Flower, who you are currently dressed as, very good. Two Flower, fantastically. He has a iconograph.
Yes.
And the iconograph is a camera, basically. It is composed of a box with a lens on containing a tiny homunculus who lives in there, has a bed, and draws. So you hit a lever, and the homunculus then sees the lever go off and draws whatever it can see through the lens.
And there are salamanders in there as well, as I recall.
Oh,
to make the flash.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't remember the salamanders.
Maybe I'm misremembering.
That makes sense. Yeah. I may have, And then in the book, obviously, they visit a particular area. This is a family podcast, so I'll refer to it as an area...
House of ill repute.
There you go. An area of ill repute. Pits of ill repute, shall we say. And by the point at which the camera or the iconograph is given to Rincewind, he presses the lever and the homunculus comes out and angrily explains that he's run out of pink. And he's run out of pink because you shouldn't have been taking all those photographs earlier of the
flesh on display.
Of the nice ladies.
Nice ladies. and it doesn't land as well because you're ushered past that. It mentions that you're there, and then all of a sudden you're given the camera. He pulls the camera out of his bag and gives it to you, and then you're out of ping. So it doesn't make sense because they've just transcribed these big blocks of text from Pratchett, which are wonderful.
I guess I took that as Two Flower had been there earlier and had taken all the photos of the
interesting.
It was mentioned in passing and in perhaps franker language than we're using today. So I did notice it go by in one
that
of the
one.
long, like hit space for more 6 times
that
descriptions.
And I guess we can say by way of framing this that the framing is that you, Rincewind, an unlucky wizard, are given the job of tour guiding this Two Flower fellow around who has animated luggage and a Flintstones-esque camera, as discussed, and all sorts of other stuff. So in part 1, you're kind of just doing some basic tour guide stuff. Then in part 2, you are in essentially the same map, but now everything is on fire. And then parts 3 and 4, the adventure escalates, and there's pirates and being kidnapped and imprisoned, and then going off the edge of the world, which is in fact where the game ends. Nick, you're nodding along.
I was going to say, you can imagine Two Flower as a sort of setting-based pun on the imperious British tourist, because he shows up in casual clothing with his big spectacles and calls everything very authentic and very picturesque, and has big luggage he carries with him, and seems to have more money than he knows what to do with, which in the book sort of affects the local economy to the point where they all have to kind of undo everything and take all these Rhinus back from everybody to fix the local economy.
Interesting, Nick. I had him pegged as a Japanese tourist.
Oh, really?
And that was a big 80s trope.
Interesting.
So it was if you think about the time, it's in the 1980s, Japanese economy booming. The Japanese had loads of money. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, which I think you sometimes saw.
The Hawaiian shirt was invented by Japanese people in Hawaii. So there you go. It was spare kimono fabric at a men's clothier.
So, and he was wearing spectacles, which it sounds unfortunately like the sort of trope you get in trouble for these days.
Yes, quite.
And so, and the camera, obviously the classic kind of Japanese tourist with a camera. So and the other point, of course, it was from the counterweight continent. And the counterweight to Britain, if you imagine, what's the counterweight to Britain? Well, Japan, if you like, could theoretically be the counterweight to Britain.
This makes sense because, and I realize we're all talking about the book now instead of the game at the moment, but this makes sense because there is a moment I remember balking at the time. I was living on the Pacific and in Seattle at the time. And there's a point where he talks about the food coming out of the chest inexplicably containing seaweed, which he revulsed him. And I thought, but seaweed's delicious. Like everybody here, the Pacific Northwest people have been cooking fish and seaweed for millennia. I don't know what the big deal is. And it was only actually like 15 years ago, I asked someone, and it turns out that all of the edible forms of seaweed, the majority of them, actually come from the Pacific, and Atlantic seaweed is mostly rubbish. So you can't eat it. So that explains that continental bias that kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But that would make more sense. Well, there we go. Now you've spoiled my illusions, because his dialogue is very much like the imperious sort of
he doesn't
slightly nerdy English tourist. Everything is picturesque and authentic. And
I think if Pratchett had turned him in, Pratchett's not stupid. He's not a bigot, and he's not stupid enough to kind of create this.
Sure.
Faux Japanese tourists. It would have been ridiculous and stupid. Yeah. So it makes sense that he would just, there's a bit of inspiration there, but it's not a complete pastiche.
German tourists were also a thing in the mid '80s as well.
Yeah,
it could have been all sorts of.
So you've got
tropes.
these kind of things floating about, and it makes sense that you wouldn't go full in on that. But yeah.
So, as mentioned, a lot of this text comes from the book, right down to the fact that although you, the protagonist, are playing Rincewind, everything is described in third person. So, if you try to go a direction that you can't go, it says unfortunately, Rincewind found he could not go in that direction, which is not wrong or bad. It's just a thing to adjust to. Talking about some of the jokes that did or didn't land, there were some things unique to the structure of the text adventure itself. If you ask for your score early on, for example, I got, you have entered 35 commands. At this time, you are rated seriously bad. And my note here is, that's funny. I liked it.
It's good.
So there's a number of NPCs in the world, but I will say these are more American style in that they tend to be in a place and they're waiting for you to interact with them in a way. This is not a Hobbit or a level 9 Chaos style. Everybody's just going to wander around and do their own thing. So there's kind of the structure where you talk to them, and it seems like something's going wrong because often the parser will just respond nothing at all, but you're supposed to like talk to them to sort of switch to address them. And then you can do a thing like say, show Two Flower to his room. So you're telling the barman to show Two Flower to his room to keep things rolling along, which I found a little clunky, but I did, once you know the trick. It's a little clumsy, and I think this is a limitation of the quill that we talked about with Beetle Quest, Ben, where you can't change room descriptions. So I don't know if you guys noticed, the inn is described as being very quiet, even when it's on fire and there's a fight going on. So it'll say the inn was quiet and blah, blah, blah. And then at the bottom, it'll add new flavor text, but it can't change what's at the top. So,
and in fact,
did you manage? Sorry, Nick.
I was going to say the very first situation you find yourself in when you're sitting at the table, that table is its own room. And when you stand, everything is transported into a new inn room with a different description.
That's right. Yeah, because like there's no graphic at that point. It only shows up after you stand up, which was odd.
And actually, this is a bit of an implementation detail, but actually one of the things that I don't know if this was a bug or just an oversight or whatever, but in the Spectrum version of the game, it must have been made in debug mode or something, because it gave me the hexadecimal codes for each room I was in over on the right-hand side as I was playing. That could have just been the game or possibly even the interpreter I was using.
Jason, you were talking about talk to Broadman.
Yeah.
Say, take Two Flower to his room, whatever it was. It was almost. Did you manage to get that without looking anything up?
No,
because it was too clunky.
Could anyone have done?
I don't know.
Hard to say. There was a bit of sleight of hand there, right? Like it was a little bit of guess the verb, and then the nouns kind of, at some cases, kind of didn't matter. I mean, it's the quill. It's not a 9-letter parser or anything.
I did wonder whether maybe it was going to pick up if I said the word room, and it would do anything with room in. So I tried, I can't remember what. I think I just tried say room, and that either worked on its own or didn't. It was horrible.
I thought I said say show, and that was enough. I can't remember what I did.
Really?
I tried something like that too, and I remember it being
but it was ghastly. It didn't. It was, and it's so early in the game. It must have been amazingly off-putting to people.
Yeah, that early puzzle was tricky to get through. The point of view jumps, I mean, that happened later in the game. That happens right in the middle of a fight. That's just strictly, Pratchett changed his point of view at this point in the book, so we're going to do that here. I didn't hate it, but it was not clear that it was necessary or helpful. Go ahead. Ben.
So we've mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I feel this is a good point to talk about some of the technical differences between this game and that one, because that game actually had sections where you were in the guise of other characters. Right. Hitchhiker's Guide did, right? You were Ford for a bit, you were Trillian for a bit, whatever it was. Yep. And like this game, Hitchhiker's Guide had the aside when, at a certain point in the game, or if you made a typo, it would give you the story of the Vlahurg and the Gvant to set up a later situation. Mm-hmm. In this game, it just did the meanwhiles, and sometimes that was similar to the Vlahurg and the Gvant, where you were seeing the gods playing dice and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I thought that was fascinating is that Pratchett is famous for his footnotes. And I only saw one footnote show up on the screen, and it just sort of came up in line with the text as a sort of a star and a purple. This must have been later on because it was colored text. It was the one of the ones I played on the Spectrum. Whereas, Hitchhiker's Guide had footnotes in the game, and this one doesn't. And it's Pratchett who's famous for the footnotes. So I just thought that was striking to me.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what we were saying about Pratchett saying that he felt like the whole thing was unpleasant. This was 1986. Hitchhiker's Guide was 1984. So Douglas Adams will have done Hitchhiker's Guide. I don't know how that was received at the time. I'd be interested to know.
The Infocom Hitchhikers?
I mean, it's a good game.
Massive seller.
Massive success.
Massive seller.
Yeah.
So Pratchett, who obviously is inspired by Douglas Adams and is the first person to successfully go into the same direction whilst maintaining his own style and doing it well, would have seen that and thought, oh, yes, I'll have a go at that. And instead of going with Infocom, he chose good old Delta 4. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like, oh gosh, what have I done? And they did. It's just really not. Sadly, it's not as good
and yet it was
job.
accessible to British computer owners far more than Hitchhiker's Guide was at the time. I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide hit a US audience that had already become to be beloved of, it was, they all loved Hitchhiker's Guide in the US when it came out. The TV show had just come out.
I hate to say it, but to my mind, it feels a little bit low effort. So rather than work closely with Terry Pratchett to produce this, it feels like the room descriptions have all been pulled out. I noticed, Jason, when you were talking about what happened, some input from Pratchett.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's notable too, in this not being a Hitchhiker's Guide episode, but yes, Douglas Adams was involved in its creation, but it needed, co-author Steve Maretsky and frankly a lot of other people at Infocom to yank that game over the finish line. Now, to my understanding, Adams and Pratchett very different personalities and stuff like that. One had a brand of not doing things in a timely manner, but I think your choice of partner matters for sure. We've talked about Board of the Rings on this show and how, yes, perhaps it is not indicative of the greatest amount of effort that one is capable of in creating an engaging adventure. That was sort of a wander around and then the part ends. This is wander around a bit, wait, and then get the next story payload. A lot of waiting as we alluded to early on. Yeah.
Interestingly, again, to a lesser extent than Detective, and I hesitate to compare the two games, but it still had that feeling of being in the rapids at the swimming pool. You are kind of compelled on. There's more moving around and trying to work out where the hell you're going. But realistically, all this tries to do is get you to the next place so it can give you the next sort of barrage of Pratchett text from the book.
So,
very much so.
As an adjunct to, it's clearly not a substitute for reading the book. I think that's clear enough. Although I will say, like, as I was playing it, I was amused by what I was reading. Like I said, there were some good bits, some great turns of phrase. You're heading towards falling off the edge of the world, and just the way it's phrased, they were running out of world. I'm like, this is good stuff. As an adjunct, for those of you who did enjoy the books, did this kind of heighten your experience?
I think knowing the books actually made it worse.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it because you knew what was going on. When things just didn't quite feel, it just felt a bit kind of pound shop, to use a British expression. It was a bit like a pound shop version of reading the book, and there was a lot to it, and it was interesting. There was some good stuff. I mean, for example, do you remember the cat at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the saucer of milk you have to use it.
Saucer,
yeah. Did you? I picked up the cat rather than dropping the saucer of milk, and then when I realised I picked up the cat, I thought, oh gosh, hang on, I think I'd probably better give the saucer of milk to the cat. So I put the saucer of milk down, and then I put the cat down. And if you do that, you drop the cat into the saucer of milk and it drowns.
Whoa,
that's dark.
Yeah, well, it sort of vanishes into it.
Right.
So there's stuff in there that's original. That's original.
Yeah.
That's original. It's clever and it's original. And that sort of felt to me like maybe, Terry Pratchett had been with them and said, oh, it's the start of the game. So it's the beginning of the game. Okay, Terry, come in, tell us some ideas, give us some ideas. And maybe Terry said, okay, well, let's think of some ways that the puzzles can fail. We've got the cat here, we can do this, and we can make So it feels like there's some of that. But I would imagine it was a bit of a slog for the poor old fella. Or poor young fellow at the time, for Terry Pratchett. I mean, this was probably a bit of a slog, and I would did he get disengaged towards the end? Goodness knows.
For what it's worth, in playing it, I really found myself wishing, and I understand, I don't think it would have found the same kind of audience. The series was not big in the US at the time. UK, still dominated by tape load. But I did find myself wishing, if only these guys had a disc-based development system, this could have just been a contiguous experience. Breaking it up into parts, I don't think did it any favors, whatever. And however that may have affected we need to kind of pad out each of these individual parts with more passages from the book, rather than puzzle content. I do think that within the confines of what was still possible in the mid 80s, this could have been more, and maybe it would have helped them focus a little bit more on storytelling and flow and things like that, rather than just airlifting in passages.
Yeah. British, unfortunately, the situation in the UK, which I blether on about every single episode, so I'm going to shut up.
Well, final thoughts on the challenges of comedy in the world of text adventures.
It's a tough audience, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? I think personally the height of comedy in text adventures was reached with Jack Around the Gym. However, you're laughing, but I'm serious.
All right.
Serious. Jason, I'm serious. It's very good. This was great. I mean, realistically, with The Colour of Magic, Terry Pratchett's writing shines through. If you've not read it before, or if it's not familiar, it's just brilliantly written because it's Terry Pratchett. Amazing. I think these two things. Mystery Science Theater 3000 with Detective, it doesn't appeal to my sense of humour. It doesn't appeal to maybe it's my British sense of humour. It doesn't appeal to my British sense of humour. It feels mean. This, Terry Pratchett, well, it's Terry Pratchett, but they've not done a very good job of translating it into that adventure world, and it shows.
Yeah, see, whereas I would say that I think that the MST3K story falls more in the tradition of the roast, where it's considered a little bit of an honor to have this attention put on you. And I think that I appreciate that also maybe you didn't know, you've never seen the Be Natural segment with which came up over and over again in MST3K episodes, always making references to Be Natural, right? Yeah. You never saw the rock climbing, groaning and complaining, all that stuff. So
I know nothing.
Yeah, like there were jokes in there about MST3K as much as there were jokes about the detective story. Gotcha. And I have to agree. I really do. And I have to agree with Pratchett, I'm afraid, on this game, that it just didn't get over the fence really well. Mm-hmm. It just didn't do it.
And before I forget, there is that little Easter egg in there where I think if you say Terry, there's a mention of Terry Pratchett appears, and he's still trying to work out how to solve the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game. So very referential to the idea that yes, all these people are aware that Hitchhiker's Guide has been a big success, and what can we do here?
Yeah. Well,
we've covered several sort of iconic cultural properties, ranging from The Color of Magic to Mystery Science Theater to, I guess just great adventures, big and small. For the rest of the Three Stooges, we're off to save an orphanage because it's not going to save itself, and we hope you join us again for another episode of The Retro Adventurers.
Very picturesque.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was edited by Nick Moffat and produced by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podcast Addict. Visit us at retroadventurers.com and follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins. Rock climbing, Joel. Rock climbing.